Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction and for organizing this. I'm going to try to be brief. My clock says 3:36 right now. So there are a lot of things that I could talk about. I grew up on the West Coast in the Los Angeles area. Both my parents were practicing psychoanalysts who had themselves grown up in conservative religious households and sort of more or less abandoned their childhood religious beliefs. And so so I kind of grew up with a heavy dose of metapsychological concepts. There was a lot of, I was aware of some of the psychological theories that informed my parents' work, and that might have sort of set me off pondering some philosophical issues. I had the good fortune in high school to be able to take a course on existential literature taught by a guy named Lou Versace, and I distinctly remember reading Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground and Kafka's Metamorphosis, and identifying strongly with a lot of the themes of existentialism. I have a member of scrawling a Nietzsche quote on my wall. Since my room needed to be painted, my parents allowed me to, and my friends to write different graffiti and quotations on the wall. And I also had an interest in Buddhism during my high school years. I had not had any really kind of religious upbringing, apart from one grandmother who taught me some things about the Bible and her view of Christianity. When I became an undergraduate at the University of California, Santa Barbara in 1985, I had originally been planning to be a music major, but I hadn't been practicing my saxophone. So when I didn't get into the college jazz band, I decided to, the day before the first day of my first day of college, to drop my music major and just take whatever courses seemed interesting to me. And one of them was a course on political sociology taught by a sociologist named Dick Flax, who had been one of the founding members of Students for a Democratic Society, who became something of a mentor of mine. And so during my first year or two of college, I was very much influenced by ideas that you might associate with the New Left of the 1960s. People like C. Wright Mills, the Port Huron Statement, written by Students for a Democratic Society. I remember reading Herbert Marcuse's Eros and Civilization, which talks a lot about both the ideas of Freud and Marx. I know that I was somewhat acquainted with the history of movements like the Wobblies, the industrial workers of the world. I was interested in the history of social movements in the United States, and I developed a deep interest in the counterculture of the 1960s and ideas associated with it. At the same time, I took a 3-trimester survey of the history of Western philosophy as a freshman, and I took some other philosophy courses. I know I took one on freedom and determinism, and a political philosophy course. And I was taking courses on Buddhism, which was a topic that interested me, courses in sociology and anthropology, those kinds of disciplines. I was also very involved in student activism at this time, and actually, after getting arrested in a student protest, dropped out of college for a year and went through a period of sort of religious searching, during which I was strongly influenced by authors I was reading at that time, including Dostoevsky. The brothers Karamazov made a very powerful impression on me. Thomas Merton, Dorothy Day. I eventually decided to be baptized in an Episcopal church and returned to college as a religious studies major, where I was required to study a variety of different religious traditions. But I also began to take a more sort of intentional study of the history of Christian thought. I was very deeply influenced by my study of medieval Christian spirituality, the great mystics like St. John of the Cross and Catherine of Siena, and Neoplatonism. The influence of Neoplatonism on medieval spirituality is something that interested me. By the time I was ready to graduate college, I was thinking about I was interested in continuing to study theology and thought I might possibly be interested in pursuing ordination as a priest in the Episcopal Church. So I spent 3 semesters studying in the graduate up in Berkeley, California. I was able to take courses from a consortium of theological schools there. And I ended up doing an internship at a church near South Central Los Angeles and witnessed the looting that occurred during the Rodney King riots. And um, during that year, I decided that I was not prepared to undertake the commitment of becoming ordained, and that I was really interested in studying the history of philosophy. And so I want, in an effort to try to be able to make use of the credits that I had earned in seminary, I decided to transfer into a philosophy of religion and theology program at Claremont Graduate School, which is about an hour east of where I was living in Los Angeles. And I began to study philosophy towards the end of my graduate school career. I was becoming increasingly interested in German thinkers. I had originally thought of writing my doctoral dissertation on Sigmund Freud and Rudolf Otto, who have discussed some common topics in their writings, but have diametrically opposed interpretations of religion. One of them, Freud, is a naturalistic theory of religion that is atheistic, and Rudolf Otto, some of you may never have heard of, was the author of a famous book called The Idea of the Holy, who coined the term numinous, and I would say represents kind of a modern articulation of a certain mystical Platonic stream in the history of Christian theology. But he was also a pioneering scholar of comparative religion. At this time, I began to become increasingly interested in becoming fluent in German so that I could read authors like Kant and the classical 19th century German philosophers in the original. And so I concocted a scheme to get a Fulbright grant. And by this time, I had just decided to write my dissertation on Rudolf Otto. I was fortunate to be able to spend 2 years in Marburg, Germany as a Fulbright scholar, actually just prior to coming to EKU in the fall of 1999. And since then, my philosophical interests have expanded by virtue of my having been teaching for 2 decades now a world religions course, which has given me an opportunity to explore a lot of non-Western philosophical traditions. And also in my teaching recently, I've begun to teach for the first time and plan to continue to teach the course on Greek and Roman philosophy. So I've been enjoyed the opportunity to go to study more deeply than I have been able to do in a while the writings of Plato and Aristotle and the Stoics and some of the other ancient Greek and Roman philosophers. And I would say that, just to sum things up, and this is the last thing I'll say, that a lot of my journey to philosophy has to a large extent been motivated by an ongoing attempt to reconcile what's basically probably a pretty naturalistic worldview on the one hand with religious impulses that of which I've been aware in different ways at different times in my life. And so I still struggle to try to reconcile my beliefs about reality with some of my religious and aesthetic feelings, and that is an ongoing challenge to my thinking. So thank you for listening, and thank you for the invitation.